Hello, welcome. This is our online Heart Healthy Nutrition class. My name is Melissa. I'm HealthWare's registered dietitian and personal trainer. Hello, welcome. Today we are talking about dietary fat. So, fat that we eat. That is our topic today, kind of a more basic topic, I guess I would say, or foundational topic is maybe the better way to describe it. And it's a very important topic within the heart health nutrition realm. So let's get to it. Let me know if you have any questions, any comments. There are three main categories of fat that we eat: trans fats, unsaturated fats, and saturated fats. Today we'll be briefly discussing each category, but with special attention on the saturated fat category. We're going to start with trans fats. So trans fats are the type of fat that we should actually avoid completely, if at all possible. These are truly the bad fats. Our bodies do not need trans fats, and they actually can be harmful to our health. In fact, the FDA is requiring food manufacturers to phase out the use of trans fats in the United States. And the World Health Organization, or WHO, is working to have trans fats removed from all global food sources by the year 2023. Trans fats are primarily found in certain types of fried foods, processed foods and snacks, and baked goods. Thanks to the FDA and the WHO, though, trans fats have become much less common in our foods. Once in a while, you might find some lurking, however. So if you read the ingredients on a food label and see the words partially hydrogenated oil, any type of oil, partially hydrogenated soybean oil, for example, that is a sneaky name for trans fat, and you should not eat that food. I believe technically manufacturers can get away with putting trans fat in food if it is less than 0.5 grams per serving. That rule may have changed. It may need to be none, but that's what it used to be. So they could actually say that there was none in there if it was less than 0.5. But essentially, we want no trans fats. Even 1 gram of trans fat is more than we want. Okay. Unsaturated fats is the next category we're going to talk about. This is the total opposite end of the dietary fat spectrum. These are the good fats. We do need some amount of fat in our diet for our overall health. So these unsaturated fats are the good ones that we should primarily choose. Within this unsaturated fat category, you'll typically see them divided into monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. Those names are quite a mouthful, I know, but that's what they're called. And sometimes you'll actually see that written on a nutrition label. Sometimes they'll just have total fat and saturated fat, but some labels these days actually divide it up further. So you'll have the total fat, and then you'll have saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, and polyunsaturated fat. All right, so the mono and polyunsaturated fats are heart-healthy fats, and they're primarily found only in plant-based sources. Some good sources of unsaturated fats would be avocados, all nuts and seeds, extra virgin olive oil and olives, ground flax seeds, and chia seeds. And those are just a few of the sources, right? Oysters and fatty fish like tuna, mackerel, and salmon also contain the polyunsaturated fats. But based on the latest research, I recommend choosing plant-based sources of the unsaturated fats rather than the animal ones like those in fish for your best overall health. That is the unsaturated fats. We want those. Lots of unsaturated fats. Now, the saturated fats is the category we're going to focus on a little bit more, especially within the holiday realm. A lot of our foods tend to have saturated fats in them. So, within that good to bad spectrum of fats, the unsaturated fats that we just talked about to the trans fats, saturated fats fall somewhere in the middle, but more so towards that bad side. Saturated fats have been researched quite a lot, and yet there's still conflicting evidence on what their true impact is on heart health. However, we do know that intake of saturated fat does cause an increase in LDL cholesterol levels, which are also known as the bad cholesterol levels. It can also increase inflammation in our body, which is never a good thing. Both of those factors, high LDL and high inflammation, can increase your risk of heart disease and stroke, among other things. Some studies have even indicated that saturated fats can have a negative impact on our mental health, our appetite, and our metabolism. More research is needed on those areas, but there is some research right now pointing towards that. So, what foods contain saturated fat? Essentially, animal-based foods. Lamb, beef, pork, poultry with the skin is where it is, lard, butter, cheese, cream, dairy that is whole milk dairy or reduced fat dairy, so milk, yogurt, sour cream, all of those all contain saturated fat as well. Like I said, essentially any of the animal fats, which are very prevalent in our holiday foods. There's a lot of butter in holiday foods, often a lot of cream or whole milk, and a lot of cheese for a lot of people. So the holidays tend to be a time of higher intake of saturated fat, which we want to try to minimize as best as possible. There are a few plant-based foods that do contain saturated fat, and those would be called the tropical oils. So coconut oil, palm oil, and palm kernel oil. We typically don't purchase bottles of palm kernel oil or palm oil, but those are ingredients in many processed and packaged foods. Coconut oil is something that you can buy in a jar or bottle, whatever, and it is in some of those more plant-based type of foods these days. So those tropical oils are ones that are primarily saturated fat. Not to get too sciencey, but the version of saturated fat in those plant-based tropical oil foods is different than the version of saturated fat that's in the animal-based foods. The saturated fat in plant-based foods are called medium-chain triglycerides, and the saturated fat in animal-based foods are long-chain triglycerides. What does that mean to us? It means that the body reacts slightly different to those types of saturated fat, perhaps in a better way to the medium-chain triglycerides in the plant foods. And the body reacts in a worse way to the long-chain triglycerides in the animal-based foods. However, the bottom line is that any of the saturated fats, even the plant-based ones, can increase our LDL, the bad cholesterol, okay? For heart health, the American Association does recommend limiting our intake of saturated fat to less than 6% of our daily calories. What does that actually mean? So, if you eat a 2,000 calorie diet, or 2,000 calories per day, the maximum that should come from saturated fat is 120 calories, which is the equivalent of about 13 grams of saturated fat. 13 grams of saturated fat, not total fat, saturated fat. That may sound like a lot, but in food terms, approximately 13 grams of saturated fat is found in the following of each of these. So 1 tablespoon of coconut oil has about 13 grams of saturated fat. 2 tablespoons of butter has about 13 grams of saturated fat. 2 ounces of cheddar cheese has about 13 grams of saturated fat. Also, 3 cups of whole milk does, and 8 ounces of ground beef. That would be the 85% lean ground beef. So all of those examples contain your total amount of saturated fat for the day. The maximum total amount, I guess I should say. And so when we're having holiday treats, 2 tablespoons of butter goes by really, really quickly, as does 2 ounces of cheddar cheese. So you have to be really careful with those full fat, animal-based fat sources because they really do contain quite a lot of the saturated fat, which we want to minimize. So, in summary, eliminating all fat in your diet is not the answer. The recommendation for dietary fat is 20 to 35% of our daily calories. That's a pretty big range, but 20 to 35% of our daily calories should come from dietary fats. Many processes in our bodies rely on dietary fat to function. We need to eat fat. For example, certain vitamins are fat soluble, meaning they need fat to be able to process in our bodies. However, the type of fat can really make a difference for our heart health. We want to choose more of the healthy fats. So remember, that's the mono unsaturated and the poly unsaturated. And we want to choose less of those bad fats, the bad fats. That would be the saturated and especially the trans fats. So we want to eat more avocados, more nuts and seeds, and less of the bacon, butter, and cheese. Something to think about as you go through this month, this holiday season with all of those special foods, special treats. Life is more enjoyable when we can enjoy some of those foods that we really love and that are special for the holiday. But we want to try to keep those limited to not every day of the holiday season, just for those special occasions, because our heart health really does matter. And some of these things that we do can build up over time and cause problems down the road. So it is important to keep this in mind every day, if possible, about the types of dietary fat that you're choosing. That's all I have for you today. Tried to keep it short so that you can watch within your busy schedule of all the holiday things going on. I hope you learned something, at least one thing from today's class. Let me know if you have any questions, any comments. I will see you next time. And if I don't see you, happy holidays. Bye.